Hello, and welcome to a special episode of the Reforming Men podcast. I'm Nate Sanders, and it's my privilege today to be with pastor and author C.R. Wiley. The C stands for Chris, and I believe the R stands for Renaissance Man. Uh, that's something I've noticed as I've just kind of followed you over the last couple of years. You're gifted at art, drawing, and you've built stuff with your bare hands, and you're a pastor, and you've written books, and you've been an entrepreneur, and so. If you're out there and you're listening and you're a man with young sons and you want them to be Renaissance men themselves, I think Pastor Wiley is perhaps a good model to set before them. And you've even delved into, as we'll get to here in about half an hour or so, you've even delved into the realm of the ethics of transhumanism. So you've kind of thought about a lot of different things. You've written at least 4 books. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is kind of my second writing career. I wrote things that were published in the 1990s, but they're all out of print.
Okay. Yeah, I've got 2 of your more recent books on my desk, The Household and the War for the Cosmos, which I actually listened to this on audiobook while I hung insulation in our carport, which we converted into a home office and homeschool room for our kids.
Yeah, I hate insulation. It was probably the pink fiberglass stuff, right?
Yeah, it's the worst.
Yeah, it's miserable.
If you think you can do that without a respirator and goggles, you are wrong. That's a recipe for getting pneumonia for sure. Or worse. And then, of course, your other book, my brother-in-law actually read this before me. He's at a Baptist church down in Georgia, and I think some of the men in his church have gone through Man of the House. And
Great.
what I like about these 2 books, I don't know if you intended it this way, but I like The Household and the War for the Cosmos because it kind of gives this 30,000-foot overview of the importance of masculinity in the household and the grand scheme of the cosmos, the grand scheme of the universe. Even reaching back into antiquity, and then Man of the House is more of it's very practical, serves as a guide or a handbook for how we can be men of gravity in our own homes, and it's a handbook, as the subtitle says, for building a shelter that will last in a world that is falling apart. And so I love that. We're thankful to have you here today with us talking particularly about marriage. You're a fellow teaching elder in the PCA, if I'm not mistaken, and you were in Connecticut for a while, and now you're in the state of Washington. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm in Battleground, so I'm just right outside of Portland. Portland Airport's about half hour from my house.
Okay, great. Yeah, and so it seems fitting to begin with the Westminster Confession of Faith. We'll start here in paragraph 2 of chapter 24. Marriage was ordained for the mutual help of husband and wife, for the increase of mankind with legitimate issue, and of the church with a holy seed, and for preventing uncleanness. So my first question is, I ask it because while marriage certainly is for the mutual help of both partners, the husband and the wife, as the confession rightly says, only one of the participants in the marriage is described as the helper or the helpmeet in kind of the pre-rebellion, pre-fall vision of marriage in Genesis. So from your perspective, what does the mutual help of husband and wife actually mean? And what are some errors that you see being made even in the conservative Reformed church today with how that's being applied?
Okay, I think one of the things to of course, remember is that Adam was there first, and he has some things that he's supposed to do that he can't accomplish without help. So I think that is relevant. Of course, what I'm getting at is being fruitful and multiply. It's something that he can't accomplish. And then, of course, there is a greater return for your labors if you've got the synergy that occurs when more than one person is working on a task. There's just the division of labor matter. And I think those are a couple of things to keep in mind. But I also think when it comes to helping each other at a practical level, we all know that's true. And my wife has been a great help to me over the years, and hopefully I've been a help to her. I think, too, the larger task of building a household is, I think, in the background. That's something that we more or less have lost sight of in contemporary culture for a range of reasons. But that was a given. In fact, it was so much a given, it wouldn't even need to be stated. if you get my drift, it's sort of like we don't have any reference to them breathing oxygen in Genesis, but it was the case. And I think that's kind of the nature of the household in antiquity. It was just a given. It would be almost impossible for them to imagine a world without it being at the center. And when it came to the work of a household, a father served as its head, and just like any institution requires an executive. If you're thinking about like even a baseball team, you need a manager. There's just that reality. And that doesn't mean, though, that the manager can win any games without anybody there to play. He needs people on the field. So I think those two things, at the very least, imply that there is a sense in which there's going to be mutual help. There are things that he's going to do that she doesn't do, and things that she does that he doesn't do. Just when we think about even bringing new people into the world, men sire children, women bear them.
Mm-hmm.
So, I can't bring a child into the world without the help of a woman, and she can't bring a child into the world without the help of a man.
We give each other a gift in that process.
Right, and of course, understood historically, your children were your 401k. They were the Social Security system of the world up until the 20th century. And again, it's just amazing the amnesia that we suffer from with regard to these things. So we are the exception, not the rule. And I think when we start to reinterpret things through the framework of the exception, we're making big mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like I think there's even analogies found in our modern world. I mean, just from the sports realm, it would be really awkward in basketball if you had two guys trying to bring the ball up the floor at the same time.
That's right.
You can only really have one point guard directing the offense.
Right.
There's been no real successful football team that didn't really know from week to week who their starting quarterback was.
Right.
There's you have to have someone who is ultimately leading the way, casting the vision, calling the play. And
I think in the contemporary world, because the household has lost its functions, or many of those functions have been outsourced, we've lost just this common sense of way of thinking about households. So now households have been reduced to essentially recreation centers where you just go at the end of the day, chill out, watch some videos or whatever. Everybody's in their own room with their own little screen, that kind of thing. Whereas in the past, a household was a shelter for all sorts of things that were productive in character. And because that was the case, things had to get done. Somebody needed to direct things, and that was the father, the paterfamilias.
Yeah. What are some practical ways that a man can be of a mutual? You've already talked about, bearing, siring children, giving her children. We have 3 boys right now, ages 6, 3.5, and 1.5. And so I joke with my wife that I've given her three boys that will grow into giant, strong men who will be able to help her around when she's old and I'm gone. And
hopefully that's true. Yeah. If you raise them with that in mind, that's going to be the case. Yeah,
that's right. She's really worried because they're sons that they'll move off wherever, they'll meet a girl who lives somewhere else. And so I said, no, sweetheart, I'm propagandizing them early that they need to find a nice girl locally, hopefully being right here in our own church, and they won't go too far from their mama. But other than that, what are some practical ways that a man can be of mutual help to his wife? And where do you see a need for reform, particularly in the PCA and conservative cultural circles? And by that, I mean, where do men need to be more helpful to their wives?
Well, I think there are, the traditional modes of a man's work that I think we can say are a help. So there's obviously the old, fashioned way of putting it, bringing home the bacon. That's helpful. It's a big help. And I think too, giving her a sense of security. I think one of the things that men fail to appreciate is just how we take kind of the sense of I can take care of myself in sketchy situations for granted, and women don't have that ability to do that. So like just walking through a dark parking lot at night, for a woman that is an unnerving experience to a degree that it's not for men. men just more or less, hey, what's the big deal? But it is a big deal. Now, you're not going to get a lot of women who just, bring that up, because it's something that doesn't serve their interest to say it out loud, or maybe they're even a bit out of touch with their own vulnerabilities. I think that can be the case. But I think those are just two very traditional ways that men serve the interests of their wives and help them. And then there's just all kinds of things just on a daily basis where, the joke of the pickle jar and all that kind of stuff. They're just different things that just in the course of your daily life you don't really think a lot about, but it's just a fact that we're there to help our wives in ways, that there are obviously tasks that need to be performed. I mean, who's going to watch the kids while mom goes out to shop or something like that? Those are obvious daily sort of routines that I think we should be helpful with. But anyway, so I don't think it's not rocket science, as they say.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think I think bringing home the bacon, I think one of the ways that's a great, a way that I would just say it is, you can help your wife by being better at your job and getting promoted.
Yeah.
That's one that I think we often, as is right to do, we often go right to the household. Say, well, you can grab stuff for me. It's, hey, there's tall shelves in our house that pretty much only I can reach, so
Yeah.
things like that, we run to that, but then we forget about our work, being excellent in our work so that we can
Right.
provide a better, because there's a financial security that comes from that's very good.
Well, I think that's huge, and it factors into the way women think. I mean, we all
Yeah.
have seen the studies about
Yep.
the differences between men and women, what they're looking for in mates.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
When it comes to women, there are things that a guy would never think about. Like
Right.
when I was looking around before I was married, I never thought she's going to bring home a lot of money. That's
Yeah.
the gal I want.
That's definitely a lie that I feel like
Yeah.
the Christian church has not done a good enough job of combating. I think a lot of young women are being told, get that master's degree, get that PhD, get that CEO job, and they really believe that a man that they're going to meet really cares about that. And we're
No,
not
it's
usually
not.
thinking about that.
I can understand the desire to do those things just because maybe the subject matter is of interest, or it's a good thing to have a measure of competence in the wider world in case, say, the worst happens and she finds herself on her own at some point.
Yeah.
But I do think it's just obvious. I mean, even gals who pursue that, the education and all that, they still want a guy who's earning more than them. They won't admit it, but deep down, they're not attracted to a guy who's not pulling in more than they are. There's a real sense of hypergamy, maybe is a term you're familiar with, but
I am. Yeah.
it's just a fact.
Yeah.
And it's
100%.
everywhere. And one of the problems that a lot of the gals who are really sharp and capable face is, finding that guy. I mean, their pool of eligible men is pretty small. I remember there was a piece, I think it was in the Atlantic of all places, in which a woman who had gone to Princeton was giving advice to other young women or other women who were in the Ivies, and her message was, get him now, because you're not going to find that caliber of guy everywhere when you get out.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys
Yeah.
are the cream of the crop, and you better get it while you can get it.
Yeah. I think there was even a very successful woman who basically put like a bounty out. She was like, if you find me a husband that meets these criteria, you get $10,000.
Right.
Which is I think that's
Right.
pretty,
Yeah, this
pretty
is kind of
lucrative if
fun. This
someone
is
can
kind of
find
fun. This is actually the story of me and my daughter. So I had to talk my daughter into going to college. And the reason was she was very bright. She scored in the top 1% on both the math and the language on the SAT. So she said her aspiration was to be a mom and and get married. And like I said, sweetie, we got to send you to school because the guys in Sunday school are just not up to snuff, and you're going to be
That's right.
correcting their English for the rest of your life. So you better get in with some guys who are smart.
Smart. Yeah. It's kind of, it's funny. If you're hungry, you go to the kitchen.
Right. That's
right? So it's
right.
like whether
Right.
you're a man or a woman, it's like if there's a type of person that you're looking for, you have to go where they are. And
Right.
so I think in the instance of your daughter's case, that was good advice. You know, you're looking for a sharp, educated guy. There's none here
That's right.
that are what you're looking for.
Right.
So
Right.
go here. You know, so that's I
Right.
think that's a good. That's very good. But okay, so the inverse of the question I just asked, which is probably far more dangerous, and I'm sure I'll get some emails, or Ben Ratliff will get another email, I'm sure. But how do you see women in our church circles needing to better fulfill that help meet role? And if
Yeah.
so, what should men and pastors do about it?
Well, I've been very fortunate in the sense that I've served churches where sort of the culture among the women in the church has been very on board with this whole dimension of life. And so I've never felt like I had to spend a lot of time encouraging ways of thinking that we're talking about here. It just was the case. More broadly, when I go out into the sort of the larger church world, yeah, I do see a lot of kind of individualism in the worst sense, where the points of reference are all kind of internal and what I want to do and what I want to accomplish in life, rather than thinking in terms of what is required in order to accomplish sort of larger things, like establishing a household and making certain that it's prosperous in the best sense of that term. Um, and I think in earlier periods there was no hesitancy to encourage young women and young men to think in those terms, that you really need to make it a goal to find a mate that is going to help you to establish a household and bring children into the world, to live in it, and then eventually succeed you. And of course, all of this is supposed to be done to the glory of God. I think one of the things that's tripped us up on this matter is we've become kind of market oriented in a bad way. The old sort of Burger King slogan, "You can have it your way," that kind of thing. And so we work really hard to sort of, I guess, nuance the gospel in such a way that it appeals to people where they already are, rather than calling them to something that may be initially hard to accept. So with that, it's not surprising that we are seeing more and more people fail to get married or have children, and we're more or less encouraging a career-oriented outlook for both men and women. I had a friend whose oldest son was a fellow classmate with my son. They both went to Wheaton. And when his son graduated, and by the way, this guy is a highly educated guy. He actually teaches at UConn. His son, when he graduated, went out to the West Coast and was hired by a big firm in Silicon Valley. And this father was so pleased because his son never needed to go home, because they had places to sleep, recreation in the provided there right on site, restaurants. In other words, you could spend your entire life inside this company.
Sure.
I think it was Google, and I was like, "Are you serious? This you think this is a good thing, to never go home?
Yeah.
To not need to establish a household of your own, to find a wife. Just these. This is just
Yeah.
astonishing to me.
No, that's right.
That you don't even think in these terms. And by the way, he's a sociologist."
Oh gosh, yeah.
And
Yeah, because
he's written for Christianity Today.
wow.
you know,
See, I'm on in the same, like Leslie and I were going to homeschool our boys, and we were thinking about, well, this Christian school, and there's a school in the area I really like, but I send my kids there 8 to 3, and then I got to help them for 4 hours with homework. It's like, man, there's no time for the family. There's no time for us to be accomplishing our mission together and building those relationships, and it's just not part of our vision for the family.
Well, and if it's going to take 4 hours to help them do their homework, they can probably do all that work at home in a homeschool during the
Right.
same amount of time.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. That household orientation, that I've been really impressed. I'm in a similar boat, I think, because I haven't had to. there's maybe some smaller conversations that we've had to have as a session with members, but overall, most of our people are on board with this kind of homeward orientation. And I've even just been impressed with the Gen Zers that we have in our church. We've got 4 or 5 young people members that are aged like 18 to 20 that are either currently engaged or about to be engaged.
Nice.
And then we've got another one that would be engaged tomorrow if he found the right girl. He's motivated.
Yeah.
He's motivated
Right.
to. He doesn't want to delay marriage. He's motivated to earn a living and to build his career and to build a home. And so
Great.
I've just been super thankful for all these young men and women that are, they're not dating to have fun. They're involved in courtship to get married, and they know what they're about. So it's a far preferable situation, I think, pastorally for me to be in than
Yeah. I've been very
not.
pleased with. I agree. I've been very pleased with what we refer to as the Zoomers, and I think there's been a really positive turn in a number of areas with those folks.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the household and the war for the cosmos, you talk about this kind of Greco-Roman concept of piety or obligations to the family and household. We've kind of already alluded to it. I think we would both agree that modern Westerners just do not have the same sense of obligation to their family and their parents that people have had in the past.
Right.
I could be wrong on that, but that's the general sense that I
Oh,
have.
no, I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. But has that crept into the church? I believe it has, but I want to get your take on it. And if it has, why, how, and what can we do about it?
Yeah, well, I think it certainly has. I'm working on an article right now for the Council of Biblical Manhood and Womanhood, their journal Icon, I think it's called. And this, I'm actually getting into this very matter. When we think about raising children, we can sort things out into different categories and priorities. We can, first order, second order, and so forth. The first order category, obviously has to do with passing on the faith. We want our kids to believe and be believers and develop the right habits and aptitudes and sentiments and so forth. Everything from church attendance to devotional life and all that kind of stuff. And that's great. But we tend to filter even that through the lens of happiness. And happiness is something that everybody is an authority on, meaning that, you can't question somebody if they say, this makes me happy. You're like, oh, okay, well, that's the final word.
Yeah.
Well, that's not the way of thinking. It's not the way happiness was understood by Aristotle, and it wasn't even the way it was understood by Thomas Jefferson when he refers to pursuit of happiness. So there's something objective in character to happiness, and we can evaluate it. In other words, we can get it wrong. And even people who think it's entirely subjective, if you press them, you can say, okay, the drug addict, the guy that's on fentanyl who needs another hit and won't be happy until he has it, is that really a good thing?
Yeah.
And people say, well, no, so you can get happiness wrong, in other words. Okay, well, let's just kind of play this out. But one of the things that I think we've lost sight of is how our faith has this larger social connection with regard to our obligations. So in antiquity, piety, pious in the Latin, eusebio in Greek, and eusebio is used a lot in the New Testament. Eusebio refers to a gratitude and a return because you have a sense of indebtedness to your civic leaders, to your parents, to obviously the Lord, to God, and so this grateful return that you make is something that in that world was obvious. This is what is the sum of piety is. Today, when we think about piety, we think about maybe an older woman with a family Bible, or if you're Catholic, some old gal with a rosary. But it's always some old gal, not an image that necessarily appeals to guys. But in the book Household War for Cosmos, I noted that there was a high testosterone model of piety that found his way onto Roman coins, and that was Aeneas. And the image is him carrying his father on his back and holding his son's hand with one hand and a sword in the other hand as he fights his way out of Troy, because the Romans believed that they were the descendants of the Trojans. This is one of those things that I don't think most folks know, but they really did believe that they were the Trojans kind of in exile. But this idea that was how pious Aeneas expressed his piety through his devotion to his father, his devotion to his son, that stuff.
Yeah, and there's a good imagery there. You know, our fathers carry us when we're small, they carry us when we're
Right.
young, and then
Right.
as they age, there should come a point where we carry them. You know,
Yeah, I have
sadly,
a
go ahead.
yeah. Yeah, I have a friend who's well known. I won't mention his name, but we were in a meeting together, and he said, I got to step out. I've got to go over to the house and put my father to bed." Literally, his father was in his 90s and couldn't put himself to bed. He would have to pick him up and put him in bed, and pray with him before he left him for the night. So it's exactly what you just said. He's returning the favor.
Yeah.
Now it's time for me to do this for you.
That is a godly manliness. You know,
Yeah,
that's what our strength is for. It's not just it's not just to attract a wife and to hold our kids and throw them up in the air. It's also to help our aging parents, you know, as they get to that point. And I so often hear of, as parents get older, that it's the daughters who are helping them and caring for them. And there's certainly lots of instances in which it's adult sons that are doing it. And hope, I really believe the fifth commandment still applies, including the
right,
blessing that they'll live a long life in the land.
right.
And I would just take this opportunity to exhort men out there to realize you have something to offer your aging parents that your sisters don't.
That's
And that
right.
is your physical strength,
Yeah,
and so
and there are many things that need to be done that call for what we traditionally associate is, with men.
mhm.
Things related to caring for the property or things, that they live in and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's right. I love that the Westminster Divines, they drive at the importance there in paragraph 2 of chapter 24. They drive at the importance of marriage, not only for Christians, but also for just non-Christians in general.
Yeah.
They thought it was important for people to have a legitimate issue or legitimate children, um, being brought forth into the world. So from your perspective, how do you see in our own culture here in America, the rise of illegitimate children impacting all of society, but
Oh, yeah.
also the church?
Well, I was involved in urban ministry for about a decade in Boston, and I also come from a broken home. I spent time in foster care, and so at a very personal level, I have some pretty deep convictions about how important, particularly fathers, are in the lives of their children. But one of the things I observed when I was working in church planting and other kinds of ministry efforts in the inner city is that there was really no substitute for a strong father figure in the home. What I noticed is, generally speaking, those ministries that didn't emphasize this and even resented the fact that this is the way the world works. I'm thinking largely of people whose political and sort of cultural dispositions are leftist. They would create systems where there would be a lot of dependency and a lot of and they just didn't have an ability to address some of the fundamental challenges of a community that's coming apart at the seams. But there were many churches where, and I'm thinking of Hispanic churches, African American churches, where there was a great deal of stress on fatherhood and responsible manhood. And in those churches, not only didn't they need to raise a lot of money outside the church from people far away, they were pretty self-sufficient. In other words, they were also very functionally sound,
Mm-hmm.
and the kids who grew up in those homes, generally speaking, turned out great, even in neighborhoods where it was pretty sketchy.
Yeah.
I can think of a number of instances where this was the case, and so young black men and girls would grow into responsible adulthood and form families of their own, coming out of some of the toughest neighborhoods in the city. And what was the difference? 99% of the time it was because there was a father in the home that knew how to exercise authority and did it in his children's interests.
Yeah. Yeah, the Father brings order.
Right.
We bring order from the out of the chaos. I've been reading this. You may not have heard of this. It's from like the 1970s. It's kind of a more obscure book, but the Book of the Dun Cow.
Oh yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah. That's
yeah,
Walter Wangerin. Yeah.
yeah, that's right.
Right.
And the story doesn't get really revealed until chapter 16 or 17. But Chanticleer the rooster, his in his childhood he defeats this wolf that has invaded his mother's coop, and his society rejects him for it. But he ends up being delivered by God, by the Creator, into this land where he, as the rooster, will become the lord of the land and bring order.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's just it's a hilarious animal fable, but there's all of these
Right.
very clear. He's very clearly a Christian author who's
Oh yeah,
impacted by the
yeah,
Christian worldview,
yeah. He was
and
a Lutheran pastor, I believe.
yeah,
Wangerin was.
that checks out. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so I love that little detail that there's chaos in this society, and it's this fatherly figure, even as absurd as Chanticleer can be at times. He brings,
but
he brings
but
order to the
let's
chaos.
well let's just think about the animal kingdom. Have you ever had chickens?
I have not personally, but several people close to me have, and so I've gotten to look into them. And I'm a big fan of Joel Salatin as well. So I've
Oh yeah, Joel's a friend. But
yeah,
anyway, I've had lots of chickens. In fact, I've lost chickens to predators. I mean, I think I've had every predator imaginable take my chickens' lives.
foxes, raccoons,
Oh
hawks.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, all that stuff. But anyway, roosters, what they provide when it comes to the hens, and this is something that perhaps people aren't aware of, but hens can be pretty ruthless with each other. They can
Yep.
be heartless
Yeah.
with each other, and often the rooster prevents that. Often the rooster will be the kind of the one who says, if there's going to be any pecking done around here, I'm going to be the one who does it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he'll step in and keep one hen from brutalizing another hen. But he also is a warning system when the predators are in the area. And if you've ever seen a rooster in a fighting mood, you know that they can be pretty intimidating.
Yeah.
So, but then if you think about like the pride with lions, I remember I saw this one documentary where these hyenas were tearing away at a kill that had been brought down by some lionesses, and the lionesses were not capable physically of repelling the hyenas. But as soon as the old man came on the scene, I mean, he just literally came in and like in a second killed two hyenas, and they just fled. But it was because this is the way God has ordered things. That was his role in the pride. That's the the old man's job. So he might sit around
Yeah.
most of the time, looking like he's not doing anything.
Yeah.
But
He's got a
but
role.
he's got
Got
a
a role to
role,
play.
a pretty needful one.
Yeah. Well, and that's you even see this in the human realm. There's all these matriarchal societies that are just spiraling out of control
Oh yeah,
because
bad news.
the bottom line is that when you've got young men outside your house creating chaos, the matriarch of the house is usually going to be hiding in the closet with the children. And if there is no man to come out and meet bad violence with good violence or the threat of it, it's going to continue to spiral. And so there's even just the physical presence of a man
Oh yeah,
can de-escalate.
yeah. You remember when you were a kid? I remember when I was small. Men just kind of were a little scary, just in general. There was even if you tried to be nice, there was okay, you're bigger, you take up more space, you kind of smell weird. You're not like you don't smell like my mom.
Right.
There's just all these different
This guy
things
smells
about him.
like 10W40 and barbecue. What's going on
That's
here?
right. That's right. Or just perspiration. There's
Yeah, yeah.
and there's less interest in like covering it up with sweet smelling stuff. There's just this, and then there's the facial, sort of the stubble, all that kind of stuff. Just said, okay, this guy's a little bit scary. But you can also project security, a sense that okay,
That's
we
right.
got our own scary dude here that's going to take care of us.
Yeah, that's right. That's 100%. 100% the case. We have different, even just that the physical inclination that we have as men to throw our children way high up in the air in a way that
Right.
makes our wives nervous, but apparently it's good for their development.
Yeah, that's isn't that a fun discovery?
Yeah.
That we thought this was just dad, needing some kind of time with the kid, and this was something we just had to put up with. And then we discovered no, there's actually something going on psychologically and even physically that really helps the kid.
Yeah. Yeah, and they need to. There's this in my three boys. They don't roughhouse with my wife. They really want to
Yeah.
test themselves against me.
That's right.
They know who the alpha is in the house.
That's right.
So they
Right.
it's really beautiful and
Yeah.
and wonderful. And there just seems to be it's clear that the impact that even civil courts have started to recognize this in divorce
Oh, yeah.
cases.
Yeah.
Just the importance of the presence of the father, and the vital role for his presence creating stability in children,
Yeah.
which grow up to be adults.
Even a father who's not got his act fully together, actually, and I know this is hard for some people to accept, the net result is still positive, unless he's a real, monster.
Real piece of work. Yeah.
Right.
Well, that kind of leads into my next question. For a long time, because of the baggage of the word patriarchy, I would just use the word male headship, because complementarian has so many problems, there's such squishiness behind it at times. Right. But how does biblical patriarchy differ from the kind of the modern caricature, the funhouse image of it?
Right. Well, I'm with you. I think that the word is a good word. Patera in the Greek is the basis for all sorts of words. Patriotism, for example. Paternal, obviously, but the term is a compound word, and it refers to fatherly authority and rule. And by the way, that passage in Ephesians 3 where Paul says that the Father in heaven for whom every family on earth is named, it doesn't make any sense in English, but in Greek it makes perfect sense because terra and patria have the same root, and so consequently you can't say family in Greek without saying father. And I think that's lost on, in the translation.
Yeah, there's wordplay there that's really important.
Yeah, he's doing something. So, but when it comes to the term, it's kind of like Presbyterian. Like for most people, when they hear the word Presbyterian, they think what? Well, they think PCUSA and that
100%.
Crazy, sort of woke lesbian on the corner with the church. That's what they think of it. So, do we just give it away? Do we just say, okay, because that now is what comes to mind for a lot of people, we don't use the word anymore? I think that's dumb. You end up losing a lot of great words that way. So I'm an advocate of using it frequently. But I do think that the qualification that you noted is really important. Biblical patriarchy. So what does that look like? Well, I wrote a book called In the House of Tom Bombadil to give a little sense of it, and I really do think that joviality is actually at the core. So Jove is the name for another name for Jupiter, the father of the gods in the Roman pantheon, corresponding to Zeus. But that's where we get the word jovial. And I think I catch people by surprise because when they think of Jupiter, they think of somebody who's always in a bad mood and throwing lightning bolts and stuff like that. But actually, the understanding was no, he's actually regarding his household with a disposition of approval and favor and enjoying the presence of his children, and his regard for them is something that is positive. And so being a jovial father, I think, is key and sort of at the heart of biblical patriarchy. But biblical patriarchy, includes leading.
Mm-hmm.
That's central. The term servant leadership gives us this, I think, the wrong impression. But I do think that, fathers should serve by leading. That's the way we serve our households. So that means exercising authority at certain points. So give you an example of how I kind of worked it a little bit. When it came to the children, I have 3 grown children now, and they all have children of their own now. But when they were young, my relationship to my wife and to them was one in which I wanted them to understand that I was sort of like the invisible presence behind their mother at all times. And I would appear if required.
Yeah.
That
Say
kind of
his
thing.
name 3 times and he'll appear.
That's right. That's right. And so she knew she had my backing, and the kids knew that. So there was a sense in which her role had added weight, getting to something I talk about in Man of the House, gravitas. But I think the main thing was I wanted to, you may have heard the terms thermostat versus thermometer. I wanted to set the tone. I wanted to set the set. I wanted to be the one who set sort of the atmosphere in the home, and the atmosphere was jovial, which meant that I would have mandatory fun times. It's mandatory fun right now. There's no choice. We're going to have fun. That kind of thing. So how you exercise your authority can be very, enriching, very affirming, very loving. But at the same time, obviously there are points where you need to bring the hammer and establish order. But if you're kind of just in your ongoing conduct, handling things in this way, in the right way, then your children enjoy the rule. They can derive a lot from it that is, and obviously your wife should enjoy it too.
Yeah, that's right.
So biblical patriarchy is leading, but it's leading with that kind of gracious disposition, so that children are not dreading your presence, but delighting in it.
Yeah, I referred in a sermon. You can see I'm wearing the Tree of Gondor on my pullover today.
Right.
But I referred to this as the Bombadilian bearing in my sermon on Sunday, where
Nice.
there's this line in the Westminster Larger Catechism 135 talking about how we fulfill the 6th commandment. There's a cheerfulness, of spirit and a stillness of mind, quietness of mind. And I thought, who does both of those? Who has both of those? Certainly Paul and Jesus in the scriptures, but Tom Bombadil in fiction.
Yeah.
I mean, he just seems like he's the thermostat. He's not the thermometer. Everybody, the world is burning around him, and he's like, I am unflappable. I'm not concerned. And so there does need to be a Bombadilian bearing about the dad, where he's clearly this weighty character in Middle Earth, and yet fun is, he's just fun. He's a fun character, and
he's got a smile in his eye. But that smile can go away.
Yeah.
but most of the time there's a smile in it.
Yeah, that's right. So the term patriarchy itself, it seems to be such a foul word that even language like leading with a firm hand, or being firm, people are like, oh, that's just, you're just infantilizing everybody in the household under your authority. I think we're just so in such rebellion against the idea of authority in general that terms like patriarchy or male headship are just offensive. And it seems that this is part of the influence of modern feminism. But in what other ways does modern feminism influence Christian marriages even in conservative, otherwise conservative circles?
Well, yeah, I think it can be the case, and often it's because of a set of sentiments that have been encouraged and even inflamed with people. So it's important to remember that feminism is not something that characterizes women only. There are men who consider themselves feminists. And I think that what often is assumed is that women and women are interchangeable. And this is one of the reasons why I think we have sort of unanticipated um, developments like transgenderism. So when I was at Harvard, I went to Harvard Divinity School for a while. And when I was studying there, and I would have conversations with people, and I was as sort of reconstructed as I am now. I have these interactions with feminists, and when we would talk about um, trends, I noted that there really was nothing in the way they thought that would prevent the transgender phenomenon, and this was back in the 1990s, from being the natural outworking of that. And they all rolled their eyes at me and accused me of, slippery slopeism and that kind of stuff. And I look back at it now and I think I was right and you were wrong. I mean,
Yeah.
and the fact that today that even, women who are being taken advantage of in many ways can't bring themselves to reject transgenderism. Many liberal women that will defend it, even though it's obviously not to their serving their interests. Well, maybe it is in one sense and not in another, but
It's almost like they're more willing to see themselves destroyed than they are admit they were wrong.
yeah, well, I think that's part of it. I also think that they don't want to accept what I would think would be the obvious implications that men and women are different and made for different things, and that's something that would be a really hard pill to swallow for them. In fact, they're willing to swallow this other pill before they'll swallow that pill. But I do think it's because we tend to see things within a framework of power. So what characterizes, say, 19th century developments in thought is a loss of interest in or belief in transcendental truths, things that are just true. And everything has been menentized. Everything is sort of at this level. And so we understand hierarchy and distinctions and social order entirely in terms of power rather than in terms of what things are and what they've been made for and mutual regard and interdependency and that kind of stuff. So one of the reasons why, any exercise of authority is recoiled from is because many people on the left today have been influenced by Marx and Nietzsche and Freud and so forth. They all believe that this is just selfish interests that are dressed up in socially acceptable clothing. And so the reason why I believe in patriarchy is because I'm a control freak, and that's it.
Yeah. You
You know,
just want power. It's
that's
just
it.
about you having power.
That's right. It's all about me bossing people around. That's all there is to it. And I just don't accept that. I don't think that's right because I think there's a whole lot more to reality than just power. And but these people don't want to go there. So if you're in the academy, so I taught philosophy for a decade and at the college level, and I spent time like I noted, I lived in Cambridge for a decade, right between Harvard and MIT. All these folks, really are laboring under the shadow of 19th century white European males. I love to say that to them. But all those guys who have shaped their way of thinking were white European men, people like Karl Marx
And
and
the
Friedrich.
irony is that their own ancestors would look at the ideas of Freud and Marx and laugh.
Oh yeah, that's exactly right. That's right. Yeah. So anyway, even this whole movement to sort of expunge colonialism from our minds and so forth. That's all European, white dudes.
Yeah. So have you ever read the play by Aristophanes, the Clouds?
Sure. That's a famous send up on Socrates. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great. It's really, I read it last week, and I just thought, man, I think every seminary student should have to read this because it is a critique of like the academy
Yeah,
And,
sure, right.
of course, not to spoil it for everybody that hasn't read the play, but basically one of the students who only goes to get the education for nefarious purposes, he doesn't get what he wants, and so he ends up going back to the academy and burning it all to the ground. And I think there's actually something similar happening right now in the
Yeah.
modern leftist academia, where this education that was received for the purpose of for nefarious purposes and manipulating people is not ultimately going to give people what they want. And I think the academy is going to be in danger of burning itself down from the inside if
Oh, it
there's
is.
not
Yeah,
repentance.
it's happening. So I've been the president of a scholarly association called the Academy of Philosophy and Letters, and this is a conservative association of scholars. But that's been the topic of and a subject of interest for decades now. Just how long can the nonsense go on? Well, I think that we're seeing the chickens come home to roost right now. So I get the daily email from the Chronicle of Higher Education, and I tell you what, these folks are freaking out. They see the writing on the wall. This message that Trump sent with taking back $400 million of grants from Columbia in New York has just got suddenly everybody is against DEI. It's just.
Yeah.
It's just this amazing thing. Every college in America is trying to live it down now. Only the hardcore people in, say, the literature departments and the feminists, the women's studies programs,
Right.
they're the only ones holding out.
And I think the statistic when they surveyed how many people were holding like DEI department positions, it was like 72% white liberals.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this was as it turns out, this was just a scam. This was another grift.
Yeah.
In which white people of the leftist bent could take advantage of minorities. And I can't believe I'm quoting Malcolm X, but I mean he was the one that
saw this.
He saw this coming.
And
he told the black community, he said, the white liberal is not your friend.
That's right.
They are the fox in the hen house that convinces you they're for you, and then they devour you.
Yeah, I remember when he was talking about, he's actually reflecting on Barry Goldwater. He says, Barry Goldwater would be better for us. He's a wolf. We know where he's coming from.
Yeah, that's right. We know exactly what his intentions are, and it's not to care about us. But anyway, what advice would you give to young men preparing for marriage in today's culture?
Yeah, well, I think the thing I would really encourage them to do is look in the right places. We talked about this earlier for a prospective bride, because one of the things I get, so because I've got a little bit of a profile publicly, concerning matters relating to masculinity in men, I get guys reaching out to me who are not even Christians, and guys kind of coming out of the manosphere and stuff, and the big complaint is I can't find a girl that wants to build a household in the way that you're describing, Wiley. I'm looking for a more traditional girl, and where do I find her? So that is a problem. So guys will need to look in the right places. Obviously, church environments are great. I mean, but even so, we've talked about the fact that not all churches are on the same page with our churches when it comes to these things. But you're probably going to need to look in churches like ours to find the kind of girl that is actually looking for this sort of thing. Not, not somebody that you're trying to like talk into it, but actually wants it and is looking for it. So I think that's a big thing. And then I think, you need to focus on being the kind of guy that she'd want. The sort of the self-improvement stuff, develop yourself. I think that one of the things too for guys to keep in mind, and I don't say this because, I'm trying to give a guy kind of leverage, but it's a truth that for many guys, when they're 20 years old, they're at the lowest level in terms of their cachet in the market, the marriage market.
Sure.
And it's only going to get better for you, dude.
Yeah, that's right. Our
as you
window of opportunity is bigger.
That's right. So, and then the range of girls that we would be, it would be considered socially acceptable for us to pursue is going to be larger than the men that the women can be believed to be socially acceptable to enter into relationship with are. So with that in mind, this is one of the things that really is comes as a shock to women, even though I think they know it deep down inside. But when men are asked what's the ideal age woman to marry, it doesn't matter how old the dude is. He says a girl in her early 20s. He could be 80 years old and say, that's the girl for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas for women, it's always a guy that's maybe a year or two, in the
Yeah.
range of her own age.
Well, the very liberal actor Chris Evans, who's famous for playing Captain America, finally got married at age 42, 41. He married a girl who's 25 when they first met. They got married at 26, and everybody's like, I can't believe this age gap. This is just monstrous. He's a predator, and it's like she's 25. Her brain's fully formed. She's been an adult for
Right, right,
7 years when they met.
right.
It really has in our culture become super bizarre to even suggest that men in their late 20s to late 30s could marry a woman 10, 15 years younger. You think about the book Emma by Jane Austen. People forget that the age gap between Mr. Knightley and Emma is like 16 years.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
culturally that was just like, yeah, this is fine.
Well, and
She's
two, it required that much time for many men to get into
That's right.
the place where they could support a household.
Right, yeah.
So
That's right.
Xenophon's Oikonomikos, which is his handbook on establishing a household, was written in the 5th century BC or 4th century. But anyway, the age difference between the person that Socrates is interviewing in the story and his wife is about that. She's much younger than him because he needs. And then, of course, what you need, of course, from a woman is children. Particularly
Yeah.
in a pre-modern world,
Right.
where you don't have Social Security and 401ks and all that kind of stuff. Your kids are going to take care of you, and we all know that the childbearing window for women is fairly narrow. Whereas for guys, you got people in their 80s are still able to sire a child.
The actor Robert De Niro, apparently at age 80, whatever, just had another child,
That's right.
So,
Mick Jagger, you see
yeah.
these guys,
Yeah.
and it's just the way. I think one of the reasons why people reacted to that particular actor's choice of a bride is probably women about his age who would like to be considered eligible.
100%.
Are appalled that they're getting.
You mean to tell me jealousy and envy was behind that reaction? You don't say. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think, and, a conversation I had probably 2 years ago with a young woman in the church as she was going off to a good college. She's actually engaged now. But I
Great.
just told her, I said, look, I don't tell you this because I'm like super thrilled about it for you. But the reality is that like your window is
Yes.
much shorter than your peers at this Christian college you're going to.
Yeah, we've got to be willing to tell the girls this.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not serving their interests by
No.
by I guess giving them the idea they can have it their way and that they can get all of these things behind them that they want to do before they have kids. And the next thing you know, they're 35 and they discover no, it's not that easy. Even with all the drugs and all of the treatments, it's just not that easy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. We have to be able to just tell our people the truth of the matter in love and help them open their eyes. Because I think I think in the evangelical, even Reformed churches, I think there in the next 10 years, if there's not already, there's going to be a lot of women in their late 30s to mid 40s who realize something very valuable to them has passed them by, and they're going to go, "Why did no one tell me?"
Right. Yeah, we're not doing them any favors by just kind of flattering them. I think that's really what we're dealing with here. Is there's a kind of the idea that unless we flatter them and tell them things that aren't true, they're
Yeah.
going to go away.
Yeah. So how long have you been married, Chris?
40 years. 40
Man.
years this October.
That's awesome. So how over the course of that time frame have you been able to nourish your marriage, that relationship in different phases? Before kids, having kids, after kids, now as your grandparents. How have you kind of fed that relationship and kept it healthy and strong?
Well, I'm very blessed. I've got a very, uh, low maintenance wife.
Mm.
Was one of the things I told my boys: find a low maintenance woman like your mom. So she's her needs are very simple, and she's easy to make happy. So over the years, we would just do stuff together as a family and with the kids. Before marriage, I mean, she didn't have our first child until she was 30 years old. So during those years, there was almost nobody that put a priority on what we see some people putting a priority on today. It was just all kind of believed that it would take care of itself, and it worked out okay for us. If, in retrospect, we wish we'd had more kids, but things over the years are just spending time together, praying together, being involved with different things. And then there are a number of things that I would do that she appreciated, but I didn't necessarily do them with the idea I want to make my wife happy. It was just these were things that were of interest to me. So,
Hmm.
I spent a lot of time improving the physical properties that we lived in and so forth. So we ended up over the course of the years buying several homes, and I would usually get a fixer-upper and fix it up, and she enjoyed having a nicer home, that kind of stuff. So she was always very busy. I mean, she's a person who doesn't have any difficulty filling up her spare time. She's got a lot of interest. She teaches piano. She's taught pianos. Retired, marriage. That's been the case. So she's got about 40 students right now. And but then she's always been involved in women's ministry activity, working with children, those different things. Now we're at a stage of life where, we're in a enviable position. We can be benefactors to our extended family. When it comes to where we are right now, I'm in a place where I could not even have possibly imagined being back in the days when we were doing urban ministry. We lived on about $25,000 a year back in the day when we were doing urban ministry, and even in those days, that was pretty thin.
Yeah, yeah.
But today, it's a very different situation because of just a number of things. So I enjoy helping people out in the family and helping my wife out with different things. So when it comes to the income that we bring in, even though she has all those students, I bring in about 90% of the income, and it puts me in a position to be really a blessing.
Yeah, yeah.
So to help her out, get things for her that will help her do the things she likes to do and that kind of stuff.
That's great. How can husbands balance authority and responsibility in leading their families? Many marriages, it seems, struggle with a lack of vision and purpose. So how can a husband and wife cultivate kind of a shared mission for their household?
Well, as Christians, of course, we have an easy place, a starting. It's easy for us to identify the place to start, and that's the glory of God. So the way the household should be ordered should be to the glory of God, and that gets expressed just in the daily routines and how things are ordered. That's what the household codes were about. But then, when it comes to the larger picture, I think that there is the work that we're doing with the larger church community, everything from hospitality to caring for those who need assistance, perhaps elderly people in the church who could use help and with just very practical matters and concerns. So if your household has that way of looking at the larger church as being a place that an institution that's being served and people who are in it who are being served by our household, that gives you a sense of purpose as a household. But then there's the long intergenerational feature to things or aspect of things. I think, again, this is something we've lost touch with in our world, where we kind of think of it as a one and done kind of thing, that a household is just sort of like a tent that we set up and then it gets taken down when we die,
Yeah.
rather than something that is ongoing.
Mm.
So if you've got some kind of larger vision, then everything gets kind of put into the service of that. So I'm at a stage of life, I'm 62, and I'm kind of thinking about the end game, thinking about, the resources that we've been able to acquire, productive property and so forth, and how that's all going to be handed off at some point and what that'll mean. So that kind of intergenerational sort of thing is the family's larger sort of intergenerational project is being served. That those sorts of things.
So is it just through conversations? Like, how did you guys have like a system? I think sometimes people kind of assume, hey, we're going to kind of get on the same page just organically, it's just going to kind of happen.
Right.
But did you guys ever have like a conversation early in marriage where you're like, all right, let's try to think about where we're going and what we're doing, and let's kind of build it out? I mean, you said earlier that you couldn't have imagined or dreamed of many years ago being where you are now. So is it kind of one of those things where you shot for the moon and you kind of, went even beyond what you were hoping to accomplish, or, how did that work itself out?
It was more kind of modest than that.
Okay.
It was kind of like, what's the next thing kind of thing, more than having this big vision. And it kind of got built as we went. So, many of the things that I'm known for now in terms of the books I've written are written in response to developments, not so much anticipating them and sort of planning for them. So, okay, it's sort of like, okay, I got kids, I got a wife and kids now. How's this thing supposed to work? That kind of stuff. I also felt like there needed to be a case made for the functional, productive household in church, mainly because we've lost touch with that reality, largely speaking, and everything's been kind of broken down to kind of an individualistic understanding of how we do ministry.
Yeah.
So that's how that all came about. And then when it came to, say, making profitable investments and that kind of stuff, it was kind of like, well, we need to do this now, so let's do another one. Or so at one time, I had a lot of investment real estate. I had 18 tenants at one time. We're down to 5, just because we made life simpler. But there was a time when we had that much.
Yeah.
But it was all kind of like, okay, we need to do this stuff just to make certain that we're taking advantage of the opportunities as they present themselves. It wasn't as though they just came at me, but I knew that I wanted to do certain things, but it was kind of more iterative than big picture.
Yeah. Yeah. Kevin DeYoung describes, I think, his grandfather's that way in his book, at the end of his book, Just Do Something. I think either Kevin or somebody else asked his grandfather, like, what was your plan for your life? Like, what was your vision? And his grandfather said, we just worked hard and we kept taking these opportunities that God provided in front of us and kept praying over open doors and walking through them. And we felt like, we didn't really plan to get here. We just, there was always something being presented to us by God, and we had to just diligently work and take every opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think for the average household, I think there has to be less of like a destination in mind that we arrive to, and more of just a general orientation and trajectory filled with values and virtues that we care about. And and that's how we'll get to wherever we end up, just kind of rightly oriented towards the Lord and biblical values.
Yeah, I had a conversation.
So I'm glad
with Kevin
to hear that someone else is kind of thinking. It's thinking along those lines. I think it's very helpful.
Yeah, yeah. I think that you kind of build the wagon while you ride it. I had a conversation with Kevin a couple of years ago about, he's got 9 kids, and we were talking about big families, and he said we didn't like plan to have 9 kids. It just kind of happened. It's sort of like God brings another kid along, and we're like, okay, great. That is more that approach, right?
Well, I think I only have one more question, and hopefully, ironically, it's on technology, and I think maybe our internet situation might be giving out on us, so hopefully it'll hold long enough for me to ask this question. But as you've thought through things like artificial intelligence and humanism, how do you see those things interacting or intersecting with the family and the home, and how do those things threaten or benefit marriage and family specifically?
Yeah, I think that artificial intelligence is a remarkable breakthrough and could be a great blessing if it's managed properly. Um, I think that there are 3 areas that I'm concerned about in terms of just kind of handing it ourselves over to these developments. One has to do with vocation, because so much of what you read concerning artificial intelligence addresses the fact that there are just going to be a lot of ways in which artificial intelligence is capable and will replace people in work. And there's the kind of the standard response is, well, we've always found things to do with with every new development in technology. But the problem with carrying that way of thinking over into this new field is that we're dealing with kind of a different animal when we're talking about artificial intelligence. It's a general purpose technology, and that's different from, say, a loom, a mechanical loom. I mean, you can just do one
Right.
thing with a mechanical loom.
Yeah.
Right? General purpose technologies are like fire. I mean, literally, fire is a general purpose technology. You can do a lot of things with it. And when it comes to artificial intelligence, you can take artificial intelligence and have it do a lot of things people do. So I think that's a concern. I think another concern has to do with dominion. We've been given dominion. So these are very reformed kind of concerns. So vocation, we believe in the priesthood of all believers. Everybody should be doing something to God's glory in terms of their daily callings. So vocation, dominion. That's what we've been given as human beings, right? That's our role in the created order, is to be God's image bearers. And so by handing all of these things over to the machines, are we in some sense demitting? Are we in some sense, resigning,
Abdicating. Yeah.
abdicating? Right. And then finally, idolatry. If we find ourselves in a place where we're, trusting AI to take care of every need, is there some way in which this could work its way into even a religious way of it, looking at artificial intelligence? And I do think that's already happening. So those are the concerns. But when it comes to putting artificial intelligence into the service of the household, I think that that's where a lot of creative work has yet to be done. I think because it's a general purpose technology, we can make it do that. We just have to think about, okay, how do we go about it? And so I think that there could be a really significant upside for households if we find ways to put artificial intelligence to use to further the interests of households. That's where I think the entrepreneurial spirit needs to kick in, and we need young creatives to get to work on this matter, putting artificial intelligence into the service of households, churches, let alone businesses and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. When I think about artificial intelligence and the way it impacts church, family, all that stuff, I think of that Jeff Goldblum line from Jurassic Park. We were so busy
All right.
thinking about the
Right.
fact that we can do this that we never stopped to ask, should we do this? And so that's my hesitancy, I think, with artificial intelligence and all the different opportunities that it provides, is that we often get so excited about the shiny new thing that we don't maybe think about the consequences, particularly the existential consequences for, what will it do to me for me to pass
Right.
this part of my
Yeah. I
job or my role off to artificial intelligence. Um, I'm thankful for your thoughtfulness in this area, and I look forward to more content coming out from you in lectures and stuff, and hopefully the church will navigate this new technology in a way that is that benefits and blesses us instead of robs us of part of being human.
Yeah, I'm with you. I proposed to the folks who are running the General Assembly in Chattanooga that I could do a workshop on it, and I haven't heard back whether or not they're gonna have me do that. But it may be that they will, and if that's the case, I'll be talking about it in a workshop at GA.
Well, if they don't, maybe reforming men can just put on that workshop for ourselves, and we'll have you can do it
Yeah,
there, and we'll
glad to.
figure
Yeah,
something out. Because I think that's such
yeah,
an important topic. I mean, especially for pastors as we navigate all the different ways that AI and Chat GPT is being used to for sermons and sermon writing and multiplying the sermon writing efforts. There's some ethical issues and dilemmas that we can find ourselves in. I think it'd be important to think through and talk through. So, brother,
right.
you've been so generous with your time today, and I really appreciate that. And I'm thankful for our discussion today. I was edified by it, and I really hope I know our listeners will be blessed by your wisdom and your vast pool of knowledge. And but tell people if they're more interested in your books and in your writing, etc. How can people find you out in the social media universe? How can they track you down and see more content from you?
Well, of course, I'm on all the platforms everybody is. I mean, you know, I've got a Twitter account or X account or whatever you call it now. And I'm also on Facebook. But I also have an author website that I never update. But if you're looking for, some introduction to the things I've written, there are things there, and that's crwiley.com. But I'm generally on social media and posting stuff, and if people are interested in following those, that I'd be happy to have that happen. So you still there, Nate?
Yeah, I'm still here. I lost you for a second, but right as you got done talking there, I got you back. But well, thanks for your time today, and we'll let Ben close us out. And fortunately, because of the way that this Riverside works, all of that's going to make sense because it was recording fully on my end, it's recording fully on your end, and then all gets uploaded, and it there won't be any sort of weird,
Yep, I know how
you
that
know,
works. I've worked with
internet
Riverside before,
problems in the
so that's
final
great.
version of it. So, thank you for your time,
So
brother, and
as soon as
may
Ben
God bless
closes
you,
me
and
out,
hopefully
then
I'll
I'll
see you
just
at GA
make
in
sure that
in that workshop.